Okay, I think we're live.
All right. Hello. Thank you, everyone, for joining today. I'm really excited for this conversation. My name is Matt Prewitt. I'm president of a nonprofit called the Radical Exchange Foundation, which basically we look at new sort of institutional designs for democratic decision making and also for shared ownership, and think about applying those in all different kinds of sort of power structures. So we think about applying new systems of democratic decision making in activist organizations, as well as like technology companies, decentralized organizations, and even governments, right? So the stuff that we work on can apply to any sort of deliberative body, and then there's also major relevance of our work to how to share common assets and how to sort of fund the commons. So that's me, and the topic today is how to think about land ownership in the context of cryptocurrencies and blockchain, and how do we think about sort of new ownership models that have some how these new structures that are coming together impact that, what can be done, what should we be thinking about, what should we worrying about, maybe what should we be working towards. So that's me. Super excited for this conversation, and with that, would be great to hear from you all. And for ease of going around, maybe I'll call on people, or should we just do free form? Okay, cool. So Pedro.
I think I was still muted. Oh, hello everybody. So pleasure to be here. I do know some faces here, which is nice. I haven't met you, Matt and Emilia, so really nice to meet you here digitally. And yeah, my name is Pedro. I'm here as multiple things as a co-organizer of the event, but I also had the pleasure of being involved in this um, sort of movement. I would say movement of trying to reinvent ownership or create new instruments for like new ownership models to be implemented in the real estate sort of context, and also like in companies like startup context as well. And that's where I had the pleasure to also meet Thomas. And yeah, and yes, I'm also one of the co-organizers of the Land Purpose Forum together with Vika and New King Co. Super excited about this initiative and super excited to be here, and especially talking on this topic. And yeah, that's a bit about myself in short. So I would just use that thing that I put the word here in the middle, and whoever wants to pick it up, do please.
Okay, I'm gonna wait. Where's my camera? Here we go. So, hi, my name's Kwok. I've been with Nikinka for a few months now. I'm very interested in the kind of this disruptive ability of these new Web3 technologies, which blockchain is obviously a foundation of. And I'm actually an investor as well as a community member in like a few projects that are using Web3 and like decentralized autonomous organizations to actually, actually fight against climate change using innovative instruments to do so, which maybe I'll explain later. But also, like, it's funny, like this concept of ownership. And like the centralization of ownership in Web 2, which is now kind of sort of being fought against with Web 3, and being able to share ownership and governance with different people around the world, but also mobilize a group of people with different talents for a common goal. This is something I've been very very passionate about for a while now. Yeah, and I'm really looking forward to kind of chatting more about that as we go along. So I'm gonna now throw initiative to somebody else.
Hello, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation. My name is Emilia Campos. I'm a lawyer. I'm also from Brazil. I'm partner of a law firm, Malgueiro Campos Advocacia. I'm also a professor in 2 courses of post-graduation in cryptocurrencies and blockchain, one here in Brazil and another in Buenos Aires, Argentina. And I have a book about the legal aspects of cryptocurrencies and blockchain. And I've been involved in this crypto and blockchain ecosystem since 2016, advising companies in this segment, in the legal framework, legal and compliance framework. I also worked as a legal and compliance director in a startup of cryptocurrencies for 1 year. It was a client of my firm, and I was involved as a director of this company. And in the last year, we have worked in a lot of projects involving tokenization and real assets. And I think that's it.
All right, I'm the last one. Pleasure to be here. My name is Thomas Klim-Trippel. I am a biodynamic farmer. I work for a cooperative in Germany that is creating a new kind of commons. So we enable people to put their money together by buying shares in the cooperative so that we can then buy land to make it available for organic farmers. We have more than 1,000 members as of today, and we've raised about 10 million euros. The organization is 8 years old. We have bought about 400 hectares of land, and the initiative is accelerating very quickly. We keep gaining momentum, more people, more farms who want to buy land with us, and yeah, we have it's a farmer initiative. It was this project was started on a farm, and most of the people involved in this project are farmers, have an education as a farmer, so it's a very bottom-up organization. Yeah, and I'm personally very interested in the possibilities of blockchain. So in 2017, late 2017, early 2018, I wrote a white paper outlining how we could create a land-based stable value cryptocurrency. So basically, the idea would be, instead of us issuing shares, or in addition of us issuing the normal cooperative shares, which is a very classical process. This has been going on for 150 years. It would be basically tokenized and be able to be used as a means of payment. And it hasn't been able to be implemented because of the high costs and regulatory hurdles. But I think maybe in 5 years we'll be able to turn that into reality.
Super. Thanks. Thanks, everybody. So I guess to set the table, I would love to hear a little bit more about everyone's thoughts about this. I mean, I think there's but to set the table, why don't I say this? I think that we all kind of are looking for ways of using these new technologies to facilitate more equitable interests in land, access to land, ability to use land, and basically to sort of avoid the old problem of power concentration. But there really is, I think, a sort of a tension to acknowledge between the goals that we have and the structure of these technologies, basically. Because if you think about I mean, the way that I think about it is blockchains basically are their power structures, essentially, right? And when one of the things that they allow you to do is to have power within a power structure that's sort of totally unaccountable to any other power within the power structure, right? So there's a lot of the, I mean, if you just go back to Bitcoin or something, a lot of the original instincts behind building this technology was about creating power that essentially is unaccountable to, independent of other power structures in society. And then there's, and yet there is this possibility of building within blockchain ecosystems structures of shared power, structures of democratic power. I'm very excited about that, but I think it's really important to actually to sort of have this tension in mind, have this sort of duality in mind between what these technologies can do. And so I guess I just wanted to sort of throw that out there as a prompt to get other folks' thoughts about that, and would also love to hear what you think about this in the context of the great work that you're doing. So.
Yeah, so a lot of people refer to this this blockchain, new internet, Web3, as like the flow of value, as opposed to Web2, which was the flow of information, where so Bitcoin is an example where it allows you to remit like value like literally anywhere with an internet connection, and these days within a few minutes, right? Which is quite insane, and like the fees involved are very, very low now, almost insignificant. And I think that what you said about this idea of like blockchains becoming somehow like kind of like a distribution of power themselves. I agree with that in terms of like this liquidity, this value. I mean that the concentration of that is of course creating power as well, and that's also why there's this kind of concept of the Web3 being the internet of blockchains. Like there's not just going to be one. There's not just going to be Bitcoin. There's going to be many different networks that are all interconnected, each one with their own community and value proposition to their communities, but also to the greater Web3 community. And that's where we're seeing a lot of innovation happening to connect those together. Where Bitcoin, for example, maybe it started off as an idea of like, yes, we're going to decentralize monetary flow and power. But then what happened was, of course, very rich entities and individuals started hoarding it up. But the beauty is that for every time that this happens, a new network or community will actually spring up, or maybe like siphon off from that to kind of further the values that were the originating values of Bitcoin. And I think we're seeing a lot of strength in that kind of diversity, which sort of mirrors more the kind of biodiversity of the natural world. And I think that that's been one of the great kind of like empowering features of blockchain, where we can actually have that kind of diversity of community of projects that are using the blockchain to move value around for different purposes, and to also enable different types of governance. But I'll just leave it there for now, and I'm going to throw it back in.
I think like what I mean, I am, and I had the pleasure also to contribute to the process when Thomas written the white paper, and I had the pleasure to going around a bit with him and trying to convince others that the time was already there. But of course, it's always a great thing to be ahead of time and also not a great thing to be ahead of time in some moments, because you need the right thing is always right at the right time, right? But I think like the more we see this momentum happening, I would love to kind of focus our conversation to try to contextualize the idea of like using the like tokenizing something that relates to the land ownership and non-speculative value of land, because I think that's where I think this conversation becomes relevant and super specific, and I would love to hear your insights into how to do that. I know that Thomas has invented some ingenious ways of incentivizing people to do that in multiple ways. Some of them not come to fruition yet, but I would love to kind of explore that from the different perspectives here and see if we can kind of perhaps come to new insights into how this can become a reality. So just that will be my contribution.
So I think, yeah, maybe, of course, it was a little bit ahead of its time. The regulatory environment has changed, and in terms of regulation, it would be possible to implement this. But the costs of implementation are actually not aligned with where we're at this point. And I think I would see a real danger of us implementing something like this. And if I look at the cryptocurrency market, where you have some projects like Tether or some other strange stable value cryptocurrencies with legal entities all over the world with intransparent structures, and they've raised more than 30 billion US dollars. And I think, if we would raise this kind of money, I think it would create an unhealthy dynamic. And right now, we're raising pretty good money just issuing shares and buying land, and it's a very healthy kind of organic growth. So I see a real danger of some of these ideas getting decoupled from the physical reality. I haven't seen any blockchain or cryptocurrency project that has had actual impact in at least the agricultural space. There have been a lot of ideas about tokenizing some positive ecological impacts and this and that, and then I haven't seen anything being actually turning into reality. And working in this space of actually buying land and working with farmers and creating these long-term lease contracts and so on, you realize that the legal environment is just incredibly complex, and it's not just about creating some kind of good cryptocurrency that has maybe a good idea behind it. It's at least in Germany. I mean, you're not even allowed to buy land that easily. We had to create a very complex and intricate legal structure, and we have to be in a for every land purchase, we actually need the approval of authorities here. That might be different in other countries, but I am pretty sure that if we would be raising this kind of money from anonymous sources, just from cryptocurrency investors, and we would be perceived as a predatory actor. No, people wouldn't be able to understand what is going on, like who is this organization. And so to have right now we are 1,070 members. And it's a classical organizational form, a cooperative that in Germany we have had cooperatives for more than 170 years. So it's a trusted kind of framework. So I see a real danger of separating from the reality and taking a majority of the people with you. It's a very small part of people who understand what cryptocurrencies are and what the potential dangers are and so on. And so, yeah, just some thoughts.
So fire alarm has gone off in the hotel that I'm in.
Oh
So
Lord.
I have apparently a real world emergency which I need to attend to. I'm extremely sorry about this. Hopefully I will log back on in a few minutes. And in the meantime, the alarm's going off.
Man, I hope everything's fine. I hope it's just a drill. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Take care, Matt.
And
Yeah.
Emilia, please. You're still muted, Emilia.
Okay. Sorry. I have a very particular point of view about this topic. In Brazil, mainly in 2018, we had the blockchain hype that blockchain is a solution for everything. And for me, we have to divide these projects that benefit for blockchain from those that only need a DLT. And why we can do and why this differentiation, because not all projects need all the characteristics brought by a blockchain, such as transparency, censorship resistance, borderless, and these kind of projects that does not need a blockchain can use a specific DLT, can use this kind of technology before the Bitcoin, for example. And why use this technology only now after Bitcoin? To take advantage of the right of blockchain. Then in this case, I don't know if this kind of projects can benefit from blockchain. On the other hand, in terms of the real assets, I think that the benefits that blockchain can bring is to bring more people the chance to invest in this field, because we had here in Brazil, for example, a very high value to enter in the real estate investment funds, for example. And if you take the tokenization of real estate in a value, for example, of 1 meter for a real estate, you can decrease the medium ticket for the entrance of the investors in this segment. And this is real good because you are putting more people in this segment of investment. And not only this, not only for investments, but actually to acquire a real estate, to facilitate for the poor part of the population the chance to acquire a real estate, your first house. And this is real good. And in the real estate segment, we have a lot of problems. For example, high inventory of the properties by the constructors. And why these? A lot of problems in this segment made this high level of inventory of properties. Blockchain can be used as a very good instrument to put all these properties, for example, in a platform in order to exchange the properties between the companies that make these properties, in order to accelerate the sale of these properties. Then it's a very good opportunity to create movement in this market that is not in a top level at this moment in Brazil, and increase the opportunities for the people to buy and to invest in this segment. I really believe that blockchain is good for this segment, but not for all segments. Some segments can use a DLT and it's okay. They don't need a blockchain.
Yeah, I think there's two things here that I think are very relevant. One thing, and that I think we could focus our conversation on, is like, I think there is the idea within this sort of current system that we live, that people can invest in assets that appreciate in value and so on, and that can create some sort of inclusion and so on. But I think, like, from the perspective of the invitation of this forum, I think we are trying to also explore the potential of, like, I mean, there are lots of conversations already happen in the forum of, like, is actually having a house a right, or is this just an investment, and, like, looking from the perspective of, like, is this something to be speculated upon. And um, and I think there is a nature in how blockchain is kind of developed right now that leads to sort of a lots of speculation. And I mean, I'm not against markets and anything, but I feel like what would be very interesting to understand, and what I find really fascinating, perhaps also, Kwok, you can share some of the case studies that you also shared already with me, is like, how can we use some technology that maybe increase some sort of speculative value of market, and can use this sort of like crowdfunding, international, no borders things, to actually create some social impact and do some social good. And I think if you look at KlimaDAO, or if you look at other DAOs that kind of have been doing that, and perhaps Squawk, if you could share some of the insights there, I think that those are examples that kind of like use some sort of market dynamics that can be questionable inside of the context of this forum, because it's the purpose of this forum to question the real estate speculation, but they actually can bring some benefits because they kind of use the market for the social benefit as well.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna grab that. So it's actually what Amelia said is like it's really, really important to understand that like not everything needs any particular technology, and blockchain is just, like sort of a more interconnected DLT, right? So it's a distributed ledger, but that can connect to other DLTs, and it keeps going on. And this technology is actually still in its, more or less infancy. Yeah, like we do have like blockchain, Bitcoin, and things like that before, but the use cases of this technology, of this kind of advancement of just like kind of closed DLTs or siloed DLTs, is actually only being this really being pushed, I'd say, in the last year or so. And so, we're going to run into some hiccups. Some, like Thomas has said, like when his co-op was trying to do certain things with land ownership, it was very, very hard because of regulatory issues. And this is what happens with new technology as well, right? Like it's always going to bump into old laws. So I'm going to share some examples that show that kind of the land ownership aspect of this is really evolving. One is in Wyoming in the USA. The states wanted to clarify this new form of governance entity called a decentralized autonomous organization, a DAO. And so they were quite pioneering actually in actually putting a legal framework around what a DAO can do. And they allowed a DAO to actually form an LLC, a limited liability company. And through that, almost instantly, a DAO was formed called City DAO to take advantage of this kind of like this new framework, this new legal framework, to form and actually crowdfund via the sale of non-fungible tokens, of NFTs, to buy a piece of real land in Wyoming, which they did do. And so they're able as a collective, organization, to now develop that land however they want, within the Wyoming state laws, of course. But they managed to do this in, I think, 2 weeks. They found out that a piece of land was going to be auctioned or something, and they within 2 weeks they raised millions of dollars actually, and they bought this like little parcel. And so like that's a really interesting social experiment as well, in how this group now decides to develop that land together, and the kind of governance that has to be the process of it for them to decide how that happens as well. Super interesting. The second one I'll bring up is that because it links back to Brazil, which is kind of like the end game for me here. So KlimaDAO is a decentralized autonomous organization that was trying to use this kind of interconnectivity of blockchain networks, so, and the fact that you can actually store real money on there, to actually start crowdfunding with the purpose of buying carbon credits off the carbon market, making them more scarce, which then makes them more expensive. And their end goal is more or less to make these credits so expensive on the carbon market that the companies that are just buying their way out of their emissions targets or pledges, it becomes so expensive to do so that they actually just have to reduce their emissions as instead of just buying their way out. And I mean, that was like super interesting. And I'm a proud investor and part of the community there, because even if this idea doesn't work in the end, they're blazing a path, like they're pioneering a path for others to follow and pushing the regulatory frameworks and the compliance frameworks, to the point where it's progressing and it's advancing and evolving to the needs of the community and of the planet. That's kind of the goal there. And actually, through them, I'm indirectly also then an investor in another project which is based in Brazil called Moss Earth, who and yeah, I mean, I'm sure you've heard about them because they're pushing the boundaries definitely, especially with real world assets for. I wouldn't call it necessarily agricultural benefit, but definitely there is agricultural benefit there. But for ecological protection, by allowing a community to crowdfund the purchase of parts of the Amazon, to actually build a wall of defense where this area of the Amazon is owned by a global community of people, and now these companies who are trying to bulldoze their way through the Amazon actually cannot do so because the land that they have to go through is owned by somebody else that doesn't want that to happen, And so Moss Earth is and KlimaDAO do have a partnership of some degree where they trade these carbon credits, but Moss Earth took it like one step further, which is finding a way to be compliant in Brazil, to buy up parcels of land and then tokenize those as NFTs, to fractionalize the land into smaller bits so that, like as Emilia said, so that people could actually, the barrier of entry was lower, and people could actually contribute much more easily. And this is something that's super powerful. And this is, we don't know like the long-term benefits of this yet, right? We don't know. We don't know also what issues they're going to have when a company comes up and says, no, we want to bulldoze through that part of the Amazon. You have to let us through. We don't know that yet. But this is sort of like showing some of the potential power and possibilities of blockchain and Web3 to enable this type of engagement from a global community to actually do something that's really, really tangible and real world. And so, yeah, I'll just stop there and I'm going to throw it back in.
So I think it's very important to keep in mind that we are living within a social contract, within legal frameworks, laws that have evolved over decades or hundreds of years. And where do I start? The first example you said, raising that sort of money with NFTs and so on. Thinking about that in my context here, if I would be raising a lot of money and then buying land to free it for the commons, I think it's a real tightrope to maneuver because you're participating in a market dynamic that is speculating with land, and we're within a dynamic where land has become an object of speculation. And if you have this kind of money, you're participating in that, and by becoming the highest bidder, you're actually jacking up the prices. So in Germany, only 0.5% of the agricultural land is up for sale every year. So on average, one parcel of land, every square meter of agricultural land in Germany only gets sold every 200 years. Just to make that clear, how little land is available for sale. And so if you're participating in this market where the supply is so low, if you're coming in with this kind of money, inevitably you're going to be in a contest with other actors, and this is a situation that we are always encountering also. How high do we want to bid, and the prices have gone up by 200% in the last 12 years in Germany, and we're at a point where farmers are excluded from the market. There's no way a farmer who's producing food could buy land from the money that he earns from the food production. So we're in a completely speculative market, and what we're trying to do as an organization is to buy this land, to free it basically from this market dynamics, to make it available for the farmer without having the financial pressures. And the longer I'm involved in this, and we're a tiny actor. We have raised 10 million euros, and we've bought a few hundred hectares of land. I come to realize, if we would be having hundreds of millions or billions of euros, we would be participating in a dynamic that where the end result can't be healthy anyways. So we have started to become politically active. And the solution here is not like, for example, you're talking about the Amazon, you can buy up the land and so on. Well, I can tell you many examples here in Germany where organizations have started with, so to say, good intentions. They bought land, they raised money and so on, and they want to do this and that ecological. And then the legal entity was hijacked. It was hollowed out from within. The company itself was sold, or the legal ownership of the company changed hands. So you might be raising money through the blockchain, but on what legal framework are you building that on? Who is the legal owner of that land, and how can you make sure that it's not captured? How can you make sure that the land registry is not being or the company itself isn't being hijacked? And so here, as an example, I would mention Switzerland, where they have actually created a set of laws in 1991 where they basically put a legal stop on external actors buying agricultural land, so that only farmers as individual people, so no corporation is allowed to buy land. Only you as a farmer, as an active farmer, are allowed to buy land, and only for your own cultivation, right? So you can't buy land and then lease it out to someone. You can only buy land if you're going to cultivate it yourself. And there's a price limit set by the state as to how much land is allowed to cost at a maximum, which is a calculation of how much a farmer can actually earn from food production. So I think this is a real solution to this problem of speculation with land, and it shows how it's actually a social contract. And yeah, maybe then we can use the blockchain to do a better land registry and this and that. But the solution is not to kind of be like, we can raise a lot of money with the blockchain and buy land, and then we have a solution. I think that's going to fail. It has to be part of a larger social contract.
I'm gonna grab that back in. I think like limiting ourselves to viewing like blockchain as a media, as a instrument for speculation on buying assets. That's it's one of the problems that we've had, because the market itself has tried to play on that, right, to create this like market hype and speculation to drive like basically investor profits in the sector, right? But I think if you think about like how these projects like Moss Earth, KlimaDAO, CityDAO, like how they've managed to crowdfund those projects and stop themselves from being hollowed out, like as you've mentioned, they're actually like they've been born out of that problem that you've mentioned, that where governance isn't necessarily transparent, or the distribution of the governance itself isn't necessarily handled very well. And so, these organizations, they're actually trying to basically push governance and politics, right? Their political agendas, using the blockchain as a way of coordinating that, and I think that, for example, if City DAO can raise millions of dollars in a few weeks, and then they can petition, a city. They didn't have to this time, but they could petition a city or a state to say, hey, we have this issue where people cannot afford a property to actually just work the land for themselves, and now we have the money to actually form like a movement around it, to have lawyers, to and et cetera, to actually do something. This is very empowering, very powerful. As you said, like in Germany, still waiting for this. Switzerland has enabled this, and that's definitely a step in the right direction. But there's so much more that can be done. Like if we try to marry or take some of these new technologies and try to explore the possibilities using them, and like these examples I've said, like they've already been very successful. And I mean, you've heard of, if you talk about politics, you've heard of Constitution DAO, and Free Ross DAO. So these two organizations formed to buy a piece of the US Constitution to give back to the people, to display it publicly, and that's it's sort of really silly, and yet at the same time it's super powerful, where people can own part of their constitution collectively and decide what happens to it. And the second one, which is Free Ross DAO, this was an organization that grouped together to crowdfund to protest the incarceration of Ross Ulbricht, who created the first Bitcoin e-commerce website. And of course, a lot of shady things were going on on that website, because this was way back when, in the wild west of early Bitcoin days. But he was incarcerated for 2 life sentences plus 40 years for non-violent crimes, and he hadn't really. So people were basically the DAO allowed them to finally, actually last year, crowdfund enough money to help raise awareness to his plight, but not only his, to the plight of all people who are either falsely incarcerated or against mass incarceration, as a policy in the United States of America. And so these are very new, of course, and they're very pioneering, but they kind of show the possibility that Web3 and blockchain is enabling communities to mobilize politically, not just to speculate on assets. And it's not. I don't think they're necessarily speculating. They're really trying to buy something and hold on to it. And as you said, it's been very expensive to do so in Germany. I mean, it's only getting more expensive, right? So it's you can work on it 2 ways there. You can try to actually accumulate land for the community good while you can, and at the same time have the financial and also community power of this we have 2,000 people in our co-op, and now we have $2 million to fund our legal motivations to actually pressure the government and to raise awareness to the general public of why this is unfair to agriculture and farmers in general. That's very powerful, and that's sort of what this allows. It's it just allows many different avenues for any person to actually engage with like-minded people for a common good, but also because the blockchain allows the governance to be transparent, because it's actually living on this ledger that anyone can see and anyone can look at any time they want. They can audit it that any way they want. This makes that type of governance much more transparent, and it means that the community, the co-op, the DAO, whatever you want to form it comes in, can actually self-govern the whole project. But yeah, I mean, I totally understand your concerns, Thomas. It is it needs to be proven more, of course. But I think that I'm seeing personally a lot of positive signs in that direction. And partly it's because the compliancy and the legal frameworks are starting to really understand what these technologies allow in terms of governance and ownership, and they're working with it with these projects because they can see that it's actually beneficial to the community and society as a whole rather than negative. And Matt, nice to see you back here, not burnt. So I'm gonna throw back in and leave the stage to whoever.
Hi, I'm back. I apologize for having missed the context. There is no true emergency. There was a fire in the kitchen, which set off the alarm for the whole building. Anyway, with the caveat that I unfortunately missed a lot of that exchange, one thing I would add is that I really worry about I worry about any sort of project, the success of which depends on the speculative energy that animated it, basically. And I think that buying and holding is still a form of speculation. Speculation doesn't just mean flipping. Speculation also means buying and holding. And in fact, the dynamics of buying and holding tend to be even more power concentrating because the wealthiest actors are the ones who can afford to buy and hold the longest. But with that said, I'm extremely interested in the governance structures that could take off within these things. So, so if you think about I think City DAO is interesting. I mean, there's not enough time to sort of get into it now, but I'm interested in the idea that, City DAO might use Harburger taxation, which is a form of partial common ownership to manage the land within their project, which is something, an idea that I think has real potential to sort of walk some kind of a middle path between speculative dynamics and genuine shared power dynamics. Anyway, I'm
just to give you a context, Matt.
Yeah.
Kwok went and talked about City DAOs, so where you were away.
Oh, okay.
So we did talk about it, so that it wasn't left out. So that's good.
I would like to put some points related to this concept that the regulation and compliance must to understand the new technology to create some regulation about the DAO. It's a distributed method of governance. And because of this, there's no center of power. The power is distributed between all of the people that make part of this network. It's easy. The law already think about this kind of a structure a lot of time before of the DAOs and the technology of blockchain. When there is no center of power and the responsibilities and the decision is distributed between all of DAO is responsible by the things and the acts that affects third parties. Because it's not because we have a DAO that the facts and acts of this DAO that affects third parties will not be answered before these third parties just because we are talking about a DAO. For example, if a DAO, if OpenSea, for example, is a DAO, and we had last week or 15 days ago a problem related an NFT that talked about meta slaves, and some people felt offended about it and want to file a lawsuit. Against who this person will file a lawsuit? Against all people that makes parts of the DAO. Why? because there is no center of power. And for me, it's not a case of waiting for a new regulation about DAOs. It's not necessary. It's simple. DAO is a kind of organization wherein everybody has the power of governance. Is distributed. Is the nature of this kind of organization. I I don't think that it's so necessary creating new regulations for every new technology that we'll have. We needed to use everything that we have in the legislation for the new technology until we can. Of course, that sometimes we have some new things that maybe we have to make some adaptation, but for DAO, it's not necessary. Then these situations can be solved with the legislation that we have in the legislation. That it's not necessary to create new legislation for a lot of things, including for metaverse that everybody is talking about. Oh, we don't have legislation, we don't have legislation. Sometimes we needed to just see with the old eyes for the new technology in a good way, not in a bad way.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I know I don't want to say anything specific. I just want to call our attention to the time and try to see if we can kind of get some conclusive insights and maybe share what we've learned so far. And yeah, so that was my only contribution. Please, Thomas, continue.
So what you're saying about DAOs, it sounds very familiar because that sounds like a cooperative. Everyone has an equal vote, regardless of how many shares they have. So everyone can participate. Everyone has an equal opportunity to change the constitution of the cooperative, and at any time propose that we have a general assembly, and at any time anyone has an equal say. And yet most people they are not equally involved, and there's a social dynamic, and things happen in a way where it is in the end a few people who end up making decisions. And so I think it's a little bit of an illusion to say that you have this kind of DAO where everyone is equal and then everything is just going to be good. We're always living in a social contract, and there's and we don't live in a vacuum. We're also living in a legal framework, and whatever DAO you have, you need some kind of legal entity that incorporates that, and who are the owners of that legal entity. That that is the actor that is tangible to the laws and regulations. And Quark, what you're saying about using blockchain to raise money to change laws and regulations, I really don't see how you need the blockchain for that. I mean, you can raise money and lobby for better laws and regulations, and you don't need a blockchain for that. And I don't see how you need a blockchain to raise money to hire lawyers to support somebody who's being incarcerated wrongfully. I don't see how a blockchain is a solution for that. So I think there's a lot of illusion and hope on this that is bound to we're bound to run against the wall with that, and it's just failed hopes, and it's raising all these hopes that I think it's very unhealthy.
I must happily offer a different perspective to you, Thomas. I think there is a high value on DAOs, and there is a high value, and there is legal constructs for DAOs. I mean, from countries that you probably would not agree, and for countries that you agree. For example, in Cayman Islands, you can just set up a DAO that then gets reflected legally as a legal entity. In Malta, you can have like limited liability, and so you do have to have a person. In US in general, you have a legal you cannot have a legal person, and you have a legal liability. But for example, in Vermont, you can also do like legal personality in Wyoming, in Switzerland. So there are those things, and let's give the example, like a very clear example why it's super relevant. Let's look at the WikiLeaks founder, right, who is in prison, and the DAO that has been created to raise money for his case. Like PayPal backed out, everybody backed out. He did such a contribution in the world. No matter what the accusations are, it's super relevant what he did. And the established SWIFT system that is dominated by America can come there and can censor people to donating money to try to do something about it. So I do happily disagree with the fact that you don't see a particular value, because we need to have alternative ways to tackle problems, especially in when we don't know that the political conditions will be allowing voices and certain things to kind of take place in society. So that's my take on this, but I also of course appreciate your viewpoint there. And I think like there is all those experiments, like no matter like I also agree with what Matt is saying. No matter if there's like this speculation value here, there is a huge difference between a co-op and a DAO, because a co-op, as you said, is one person, one vote, and this is a very limited way of creating governance. Like in a DAO, you can create all different ways on how to evolve with the governance. I'm not saying that this is wrong to have it as a co-op, but like who says that this is the future and the only way that we can define governance, right? So we need to have like a framework to experiment and try new things. So that's where I'm also sure that you also appreciate the innovation that can come with it, but I also understand your cynicism, because your cynicism in the fact. But I think we should not forget to leave space for the innovation and for the surprise that new experiments can lead us to discover new ways of doing things that might be positive, right? Despite the fact that there is a high probability of this just being lots of it just being speculative and going in a wrong direction. So I just wanted to kind of firmly point that out.
Yeah, I'm just going to grab that just quickly. I'm also part of a co-op as well. And so, like the many spectrums of humanity, of society, and wanting to not just have one system, and wanting to be able to maybe contribute and explore different systems is also super powerful, because that expands our political mentality, right? And it's, I think, is a lot of what we suffer from as a world is our way of thinking. And what this does is like all these technologies are just expanding what's possible, not only in the way we think and interact with each other, but then also then maybe what's legally or not legally so far, at least not clearly is possible. And yeah, I think that there's a lot to be learned from these projects that are pioneering, and maybe, like going through the bumps and getting, the cuts and bruises for us. And I'm just excited about where this is going, because I think that we do need alternative forms of governance. We do need alternative forms of collective initiative and ways to mobilize, because things haven't worked so far. At least that's my view. But of course, that's also quite arguable too.
Just we should start wrapping up. If anyone has sort of thoughts about where we should go next, it would be great to close with them. One thing that I wanted to say at a very high level of generality is that I think that, at least to me, it's fairly clear that these new governance structures, these new sort of power structures, is how I think of them, basically, matter. And I think that, whenever we talk about new ways of organizing power, it's very clear that things can get better, and it's also equally clear that they can get worse. And I think that, as a not terribly proud Californian, I have a long-term relationship with the social norm of optimism. And I have some comments about that. So one thing is that I've come to the conclusion that both optimism and pessimism are basically beliefs about the future unsupported by evidence. It's very bizarre, actually, to me, to claim to be an optimist or to claim to be a pessimist, right? What does that really mean? And I think that that sort of attitude, this sort of very even-keeled, very open-eyed acknowledgement that things can get better and that they can indeed get worse. Things are never so bad that they can't get worse, and yet it's always possible for them to get better. I think that's the right sort of attitude with which to approach new technologies, new power structures, possibilities of new governance.
Well said. I'm just going to end up with this myself by saying, get involved. Like, you've got Thomas here with his co-op. Get involved with his co-op if you're interested in agriculture. If that's a topic that interests you. I'm interested in climate protection, so I get involved in these co-ops and these DAOs and stuff that are interested in that. And I'm learning a lot along the way. And yeah, I mean, I'm growing with them; they're growing with me. So I'd say get involved. It's a lot of fun. It's also frustrating because there's always roadblocks and stuff. But I mean, we can all work on this together, and that's the way it's gonna work in the end. So yeah, thanks.
Well, thank you for the invitation. And in my point of view, the technology is amazing and will be used for a lot of things, good things and bad things, for speculation and for other products that will be amazing. It's not easy control this. Then let's work in the projects that we believe. Thank you.
So I also still believe that the technology itself holds a lot of potential, but I think it's important to integrate it into existing good structures. I think overall we live in a there's a lot of good aspects about the world that we live in, and there's a lot of shortcomings, and I think we can use it. This technology for a good incremental change, and we will need generations to work on that. And I don't believe in any kind of radical change that is going to dramatically improve our well-being and the world. I see a real danger in these ideas of radical change, because things are not so bad right now, and radical change can also be radically bad.
All right. Thanks everybody for the conversation. I'm very sorry that I had to step out in the middle and drop the thread there. But great to meet you all. And this is great. I hope we can remain in further conversation and kind of figure out what we can do to steer the big cruise ship that we're all riding in the right direction. Yeah, I guess with that we're over time, so we should close. But thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks. That was great.
Look forward, stay in touch. We do have this Discord community if you want to join in there and stay in touch over there, or also invite anybody that is related to this like non-speculative real estate thing. We will continue doing this forum, and we're really interested to gather an international community that can contribute to best practice around this topic. So feel free to invite others, and also let's continue this conversation. Thanks so much. Super nice to see you all. Nice to see you, Thomas. Nice to see your baby. And have a wonderful Saturday, everybody, and hopefully see you soon somewhere.
Have a wonderful weekend. Bye-bye.